are by the entrance of the cafeteria. Pizza and refreshments can be found in the front of the room, and copies of tonight's slide deck can be found at these tables over here by the door. I would now like to invite Ward Councilor Judy Pineda-Neufeld up to say hello.
All right, good evening, Ward 7. We could do better than that. Good evening, Ward 7. Great. My name is Judy Pineda-Neufeld. I am your ward counselor here in the ward. I live over on Gorham Street. Formerly, I was on Paulina, so you may wonder why I moved. I had a baby about a year and a half ago, so we moved to a bigger place. Yes. He is, I'm sorry for all you parents, the cutest kid in Somerville. We have deemed him. His name's Isaac. You may have seen us walking and toddling around, taking strolls through the neighborhood. He loves saying hi and petting all your dogs, so thank you for those who let him do that. I am here till the very end tonight, so if you have questions, I am here for you. Happy to be helpful in any way I can. Quick announcement, I do have my cards and a sign-up list for my newsletter that I send out about once a month-ish about Ward 7 issues and citywide news. So if you're not on that, be sure to add your name and email address. I'm happy to keep you all posted. And looking forward to hearing updates tonight on lots of important things happening in our ward. And please do reach out anytime. Say hello if you see me and Isaac walking around the neighborhood. But I'm available on email, text, phone to serve you. So thank you again for coming tonight, and I will pass it back.
Thank you so much, Counselor. I just want to touch on the meeting format tonight. After each presentation, we will take 2 initial questions. We have microphones available for audience questions, so please raise your hand and wait for the microphone before asking your question. If we don't get to your question initially, please hold on to it because at the completion of all presentations, we will open up into a general Q&A. And also please note that we would like to give everyone the opportunity to ask a question. So during the Q&A segments, I will be trying to prioritize members who have not had a chance to speak yet, but I will circle back. So if we don't get to your question tonight, please email cm@somervillema.gov and we'll direct your comment to the appropriate department. Tonight's meeting is being recorded. Meeting recordings will be available online at the conclusion of our meeting series and will be posted on the City TV government YouTube channel. And with that, I have a few quick city updates before we dive into the main presentation. So a reminder that the presidential election is on Tuesday, November 5th. On this slide, you'll see key dates like the voter registration deadline and early voting dates. All election information can be found at somervillema.gov/elections. In a similar vein, the election department is looking for help for the upcoming November election. So if you're interested, please scan this QR code or email elections@somervillema.gov to learn more and sign up for an information session. Somerville's second participatory budgeting process has begun. It started on September 20th, and you can submit ideas for how the city should spend $1 million. Ideas can be submitted through November 20th by visiting somervillema.gov/pb. Somerville's Office of Sustainability and Environment is seeking volunteers for focus groups to help shape a new rental registry and energy disclosure ordinance. Please visit somervillema.gov/rred for more information and to sign up for one of the focus groups. The Department of Racial and Social Justice is excited to share that the Public Safety for All Task Force, Civilian Oversight Task Force, and Anti-Violence Working Group are finalizing their group reports and policy recommendations. RSJ anticipates that sharing the findings and recommendations publicly before the end of 2024. And on this next slide, you can find ways in which you can get involved and stay in touch with RSJ. At home, community members can combat flooding in their neighborhood through our Adopt a Drain program. When you adopt a drain or drains, you commit to caring for a local storm drain of your choice by checking on it and performing light maintenance as needed before and after heavy rain, wind, or snow. And as a bonus perk, you can also give it a name. So on this slide, you can see some of our favorites. If you're interested in adopting a drain, please visit somerville.mysticdrains.org. I'd like to note some upcoming events happening in Somerville. So we have the Fall Festival that was rescheduled to this Thursday, September 26th from 4 to 7 p.m. at Founders Memorial Rink located at 570 Somerville Ave. We also have the Ignite Festival at Union Square on Saturday, September 28th. And to see more upcoming events, please visit somervillema.gov/calendar. Finally, you can stay in touch with all things City of Somerville by subscribing to our weekly newsletter. You can do this by using the QR code on the slide or by visiting somervillema.gov/subscribe. On this webpage, you'll find a list of other departments that have their own newsletters. We welcome and encourage you to subscribe to any and all that may interest you. So this concludes our quick updates portion, and I would like to welcome Mayor Ballantyne back to the podium.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's so nice to see you this evening. I want to acknowledge that we have some elected officials with us this evening, and I would ask if you could stand. So I see the Councilor at Large, Kristen Strezzo, School Committee for Ward 7, Laurent Baton, of course, our Ward Councilor, Judy Pineda-Neufeld, and former Ward 7 School Committee person, Carrie Norman, is here. I'm sorry, who else? Where? Oh, sorry, way back there. Hi. Councilor at Large Willenbaugh is also here. So usually I ask some questions in the front of this meeting so we can get to know one another. So my first question is, if this is your first City Hall community meeting, please raise your hand. Wonderful, thank you. Thank you for coming. If you've lived in Somerville under a year, please raise your hand. Okay, welcome. Under 2 years? Under 5, raise your hand. Okay, under 10. Between 10 and 20 years, raise your hand. Between 20 and 30, raise your hand. Okay. Over 30. Okay, your entire life, please raise your hand. Thank you. Okay. If you've used the new community path in the last year, raise your hand. Okay. The Green Line, any of the new Green Line stations, please raise your hand. Okay. If, let's see, if you're a pet owner, raise your hand. Okay. So, thank you. Oh, if you're a parent of a child in the Somerville Public Schools, raise your hand. Okay. If you have a child who's graduated, raise your hand. If you're a grandparent with children in the Somerville Public Schools, raise your hand. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Next, what I'd like to do is we have many of our city staff here that represent various departments. I'm going to ask them to do a very quick introducing themselves and the department. The reason being is sometimes people have very specific questions they have to leave. They will at least know at the front end of the meeting who the person is that could possibly answer their questions. So I'm going to start on the left, and I would say, staff, can you step forward or just a little bit so I can see you? So so Alicia, we'll start with you and we'll go left around.
Thank you. Alicia for the Road and Control and Special Services Department. Caitlin Blaharsley, 311 Constituent Services.
Ed Hardy, 311 Constituent Services.
Brad Rawson, Mobility Division.
Charlie Reed, Fire Chief.
Richard Grach, Director of Infrastructure and Asset Management.
Emily Sullivan, Office of Sustainability and Environment. Gina Cortese, Department of Infrastructure and Asset Management.
Dan Bartlett from the Planning Division.
John Camp, Public Space and Urban Forestry.
Good evening, everyone. Shumaine Benford, Somerville Police Department.
Emily Hutchings, Planning, Preservation, and Zoning Division. Kelly Highland, Deputy Director of Public Health in HHS.
Lisa Davison, Housing Division.
Alana Gaffney, Housing Division, also a very proud Ward 7 resident. Natasha Naeem, Social Worker, Somerville Council on Aging.
Huggin Brooks, Racial and Social Justice.
Roberta Cameron, Community Preservation Act Manager, and that is the Office of Strategic Planning and Community Development Finance Division.
Chani Salamoon, Economic Development and Workforce Development.
Good evening, Nick Salerno, Elections Commissioner.
Jim Donovan, Police Department.
Victoria McGregor, Communications Department.
Thank you. Thank you. So the agenda was put up earlier. We're going to be covering a lot of topics. And I know that specifically there are people who are very interested in the unhoused situation in Davis Square. We will be covering that. Tonight also at the front end, I'm going to focus on some of the important work that the city does for the city, not just to meet the basic needs, but to achieve our most aspirational goals. That's investing in and updating and maintaining our infrastructure. Infrastructure is all of the facilities. It's physical systems that serve our community. At the city level, that means everything from roads, buildings, sidewalks, to utilities like water and sewer, to public parks, playgrounds, to smaller items like manhole covers and street lights. But despite how vitally important infrastructure is, our nation has been neglecting it. Since the American Society of Engineers started grading the condition of the country's infrastructure in 1998, the nation has gotten a D or a D plus every year but one. Somerville is no different. We've been underinvesting in infrastructure for decades, so I've made it a priority to accelerate the work. But infrastructure is extremely costly and time-consuming, so our community has had to find new ways to move forward. We've done this a number of ways. We've planned ahead to build up our revenue reserve streams, completed years of visioning and planning. We've been smart to bring in community-driven development that creates new tax revenue to fund our needs. We've also improved our bond rating. Strong fiscal management is a central focus of my administration that goes hand in hand with making infrastructure projects possible. And last year, we earned the AAA bond rating for the first time ever. That saves us money by lowering our interest rates when we borrow. And to be clear, we do have to borrow for the larger projects, like the high school, which cost about $280 million. And we've had to staff up. For example, in the past 7 years, we've increased our infrastructure and asset management staff from 8 to 35. To our community's credit, via the measures, we've been able to begin righting the ship. But it's going to take time, determination, and more of those traffic detours we all love to keep moving forward. When I say that we've focused on our infrastructure, this is what it includes. 109 miles of municipal roadway, 167 miles of sidewalk, 181 miles of sewer and stormwater pipes, 125 miles of water mains, 4,802 manhole covers, 1.6 million square feet of building, 15,600 water service connections. I won't read the whole slide. There's more, but this just gives you a picture. A key thing about all this infrastructure is that most of the major items were built in the 1800s and early 1900s. That includes the network of roads, many of our buildings, and especially our sewers, many of which are still more than 100 years old. Schools are the one main exception. All but 2 of our schools were built or replaced in the mid-1990s or later. The 2 older schools are the ones that we're planning around now, the Winter Hill and the Brown. The Winter Hill School was built in 1974 using now disapproved construction methods that are failing in many similar buildings worldwide. The Brown, our oldest school, was built in 1900 when men were still wearing top hats. But even our newer school buildings require maintenance, modernization, and upgrades. For this reason, I ordered a full evaluation of all our schools as soon as I took office. That includes our K-8 master plan, which is guiding the work of the Winter Hill, Brown, and system-wide school building needs. But we are focused on more than just fixing that has been neglected for many years. Rather, our needs, demands, and goals have fundamentally shifted in recent years and decades, and our aspirations have grown. Striving to do more means every project is more complex and takes more time. We don't just pave roads. We transform them from being just from cars to being safe for vehicles, buses, bikes, car shares, walkers, and rollers of all ages. We don't just rebuild streetscapes and buildings, we squeeze in more green and open space with them. We don't just replace failed water mains, we build and reduce flooding and sewer backups into our homes and businesses. We build new schools now to meet complex curriculum needs, and wherever possible, we are advancing our climate action goals by also greening up our projects with energy efficiency, fossil fuel reduction, and more. In short, we find ourselves facing the challenge of reshaping the 20th and 19th century infrastructure to meet our 21st century goals. But in Somerville, we're always up to taking on tougher challenges, so we're pushing hard to meet our infrastructure needs and our infrastructure goals. I'll start with our schools. It is our responsibility to ensure our students have the schools and resources they need to learn and thrive. Again, our most significant school project right now is the Winter Hill. We've been accepted into the MSBA state funding program for the Winter Hill and possibly the Brown needs as well if the community supports including the Brown. Everyone interested is invited to participate in the community process around that, which will start up this fall. We need state support to both afford this and to ensure that we have room left for other needs like roads and public spaces. And the MSBA is a reimbursement vehicle, so they will pay up to 49% of a construction cost. So if the Winter Hill School costs $250 million, we get reimbursed for $120 million or $124 million. We are also continually working on other school upgrades, both inside and out, be that playgrounds or new heating and cooling systems. We are also continually assessing pavement conditions and repaving our roadways to restore them after the ravages of a New England winter. We know how awful it is for you to drive over a pothole that throws out your suspension in your car. So in addition to pothole filling, we have a paving program that targets streets that are most in need. We will talk about that. Thank you. That is going to be discussed. The map on here is also online as an interactive map. It shows what we've paved recently and what's coming up. Purple are streets under contract now for completion next year. Blue is planned in the next 5 years. We are also want everyone and every ability to be able to navigate our sidewalks. So in addition to spot sidewalk repairs, we work systematically as well to upgrade full sidewalks for accessibility and safety. When we can, we roll a sidewalk into street projects which bring those all-important cost savings. We just completed phase 1 of repaving Highland Ave. I know it seems like it took forever. That's partly due because of the pandemic disruption. It's also because we upgraded the sewers and other underground utilities first before putting down interim paving. Soon we'll start the design process for the full redesign with the community's priorities at the forefront. We've got more projects underway for Elm and Beacon, Broadway and Western Pearl Street, Washington Street, and more. We also recently completed projects on Eastern Pearl Street, Powder House Boulevard, Holland Street, and more. In all of them, we'll be working to meet multiple community needs and goals. In our recent Public Safety for All survey, the #1 safety concern raised over and over was traffic safety. We heard that then, and we heard it before, and my administration has been greatly increasing the pace of traffic calming installation like speed humps and raised crosswalks as a part of our infrastructure work. Brad also has some slides. He's our Director of Mobility. Brad, can you just raise your hand? He will also be speaking and specifics to Ward 7, so he'll give you the detail when he's up here. We are also continuing to work to maintain and improve more than 80 parks, playgrounds, and fields. Projects can be as large as the construction project at Rivas Field or as small like the recent expansion of Glen Park Community Garden. And again, in the spirit of getting more out of every project, we don't just build above ground when we construct green space. We add water retention features under every park where possible to reduce flooding, and it works. When I was a counselor, I used to get regularly heart-wrenching phone calls and emails from people who lived around Union Square, even though I represented Ward 7, about their homes and businesses which had flooded. After the water retention tank holding 1.2 million gallons of water was installed under Lincoln Park next to the Argenziano School in Union Square, most of those calls have stopped. Our city buildings also need attention. Our firefighters deserve quality facilities, and our residents need fire stations that best serve our neighborhoods. We are currently building the city's first fire station in roughly 100 years over at Assembly. Next month, we start another important city building project. City Hall will at long last get a new slate roof, and the clock tower will be repaired. Thank you. Our water and sewer system may be mostly underground and out of sight, but it is easily our most critical infrastructure. We cannot function without clean water and proper wastewater systems. And with increasing extreme weathers, we must reduce flood risk. We also have a federal requirement, administrative order, for stormwater and a coming federal sewer consent decree that requires upgrades to our combined sewer system. Projects underway include monumental efforts like the Poplar Street Pump Station, which is over in the Brick Bottom neighborhood, not too far from Target. The pump station will have sewer capacity for nearly 2/3 of the city to the west of Poplar Street. So that's basically part of Ward 6, going into Ward 5, and then 3, 2, and 1. Also, the Mystic River outfall, the sewer separation project will add similar sewer capacity for the area north of Poplar Street. Other more targeted projects like Morrison Ave flood mitigation or Central Broadway water main upgrades are also underway. When you reduce these projects to a few rows of text on a slide, it's easy to miss how big they are. So I just wanted to take a moment to let you gaze at the work underway in this photo, and this is the Poplar Street Pump Station, which is, as I said, in the Brick Bottom neighborhood, and those little yellow figures are workers. Last on the list, a shout out is well due. It goes to our team who have been working to replace all the lead water service lines to keep this poison out of our drinking water. We are a national leader on this. Somerville will have eliminated all known lead service connections by next year, 2025. The MWRA, where we get our water, in fact, is asking our staff to help teach other communities on how to do this now, that there are new federal requirements for this. I do also want to share that all of this work takes time, involves many steps. This chart is simplified, but you get the idea. It starts with assessment and financial planning. We do community engagement, design, procurement, and more before we even get to construction. That's why we measure most project schedules in years, not in months. As just one example, we started planning the rebuilding of Somerville High School in 2012. Today, 12 years later, we are still working to complete the multi-year punch list to close out the remaining finishing work. Managing costs is also at the root of why infrastructure is neglected nationally and in most cities. I'm not willing to kick the can down the road on these critical needs. So we are working to plan carefully for bonding and borrowing. We seek alternative revenues such as federal and state funding and new tax revenue growth. To give you a sense of the numbers, the Somerville Ave utility and streetscape project was $72 million. The Spring Hill sewer separation was $38 million. Somerville High School, as I said, was $280 million. And the Poplar Street Pump Station we looked at on the earlier slide just a moment ago is a $113 million project. Sidewalk costs are about $1.5 million per mile for one side of the street. Paving a road is another $1.5 million for 1 mile. And accordingly, if you do a full street reconstruction, it's in the order of $4.5 million per mile. With such high costs, we always strive to work as efficiently as possible, both in terms of time and money. One way to do this is by only digging once. That means that we coordinate with city teams and utility companies, such as Eversource Gas, to ensure underground work is completed first before we pave a road. It makes no sense to dig up a road, damage a new road to do utility work, but we used to do this. Now, so we used to pave, and then, we had to do utility work, so we dig it up again, and then it'd have to be paved again. Now we coordinate everything, and that coordination between the utilities and all the departments takes a bit of time. So that's why we don't have to pay for repairs that the damage would cause. Another way we work more efficiently is by pursuing multiple goals within a single project. For example, the Spring Hill Sewer Separation Project is a stormwater management project. Its main goal is to reduce flooding in the city, reduce water pollution, and modernize our underground infrastructure. But a project of this scale gives us an opportunity to reimagine the streetscape above ground too. So we plan to build additional features for safety, mobility, accessibility, sustainability, while bringing more greenery to the neighborhood. Building all of these needs at once lowers the overall cost and also gets us more benefit from the project. To sum up, we are investing in our infrastructure not only to meet our basic needs like clean water and safe streets, we are building for right now and for the future generations so people can thrive in Somerville today and tomorrow. We are rebuilding to create a better quality of life. So, thank you. Thank you for listening. I can take 2 questions now. I'm here all evening, and we'll then move on to the other pieces of the agenda segments.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to tag on to the infrastructure, and I believe there's going to be a meeting coming up, I think, with Benjamin Campaign at some point. It hasn't been scheduled yet, but maybe to review and kind of revisit the idea of having municipal broadband internet in the city, since we're doing all this work, digging up the streets and all of that. I've been learning about it, and I know that people really love the electric supplier program that's community run, and I think it would be a similar type of thing. And anybody that I've talked to about it, they really love the idea, and they're like, why aren't we doing this already? And of course, it's a cost like everything, but I see it as a long-term investment for the city, because then when new technology comes around, we can take advantage of that, because it will be fiber optic, as opposed to the copper tubing that we have now, which is inferior to the fiber optic is much more secure, much better, and only, I believe, 20% of the city has it. So if we went with the fiber optic, it would be available for everyone would have it. And like I said, it would be community run, and I think people would like to have the option maybe to have that, as opposed to just doing Comcast or Verizon or whatever. And I know that, there are lots of, we hear, there's tons of internet providers out there, but depending on where you live in the city, you may not have access to that. And like I said, only 27% have access to the fiber optic. So I think it would be a great opportunity now while we're doing all this work. And I hope the city would support that, at least maybe do a feasibility study and see is this something that we could do. The other question I had really quick was the streets. You said they're going to be done, and that's great. Judy had sent me, Judy Pineda Newfield had sent me a link, and I looked at it. I'm dying to get Raymond Ave done, and I know I've talked to you about this as well. Is there a schedule for when the streets are going to be done? I know Raymond Ave is on the 5-year plan, but I looked at 2024. They don't have the 2025 out yet. So I'm just wondering when, because it just continues to get worse and worse and worse in terms of the holes and whatnot.
So that was a 2-part question. So I'm going to ask Director Raish to just comment on the fiber. Oh, you can take both parts. Okay.
Hello. So the council is looking into municipal broadband. There's a working group that's looking at it. There's a lot that goes into it, a lot to figure out. We have been putting in dark fiber, just basically empty conduits, where we can fit them in. Like at the Somerville Ave project had the entire length of that has, I think it's a 4 or 6 bank conduit that goes along with that. Some of the other projects are more difficult, and we haven't been able to do it. Largely, more on the side streets. So the Spring Hill Sewer Separation Project, for example, those side streets like Berkeley and Avon are already so jam-packed with water, sewer, drain, gas. We couldn't find sort of an avenue or a corridor for fiber in that one, so we didn't. So at this point, it's something that we're sort of planning for and incorporating opportunistically in the projects as we can go, in parallel with the broader effort to really explore the feasibility of being able to do that, which is fascinating. On the paving, when was the last time you looked online for the paving management plan? Okay, check again, because I think about 2 weeks ago we updated it for this year, and so we should have the 5-year plan. And in fact, that interactive map, which I think is only 2 weeks old, that has the 5-year projection on it. So you can go in that interactive map and find your street on it, and by the color code, you can see what we pave and what we plan on be paving for the next 5.
Hi, I'm a resident of this street. It's the first time I showed up at one of these meetings, and my question, and it is a question, is around the specific moves for safety. And I put those in buckets of sidewalk and Davis Square area. And so the first question around safety goes with an example. What is doing around consequences or enforcement for sidewalk safety? I walk every morning at 5 a.m. Hi. This week, I was almost mowed down twice between 5:45 and 6 a.m. on the sidewalk at Powder House, once by a person on an electric scooter, and once by a person on an electric blue bike. Was called a bitch for asking him to please take the street, and then stalked for another block as I walked home.
Okay,
So I'll give you a two-part, and then I'm done. So my first question is around the city's long-term plan for safety, because while broadband is nice for a lot of people, I need to be personally, physically safe first. The second extends towards safety towards Davis Square. I used to walk through Davis Square for my hour-long walk. I would return library books. I had overdue booked for a month because I couldn't get there during business hours, and I refused to get there in the morning. We take my child, he goes to a different school, he has to go across the city, and we drive him because we don't trust him to walk to and from Davis. So I live in a town that talks about being green, but the safety of my town has me putting gas in my car and not my kid on the T. And I want to know what we do there first. I could go on about the speed bump that keeps me awake, because I've turned on my air conditioner to close my windows because I've slept maybe 2 hours in a row since the temperatures have dropped. Because we all know, but don't want to name, the thing out here is at least 2 inches above code. And if you drive all the speed bumps in the city, this one's the big one. And it hates minivans and Priuses. I've been here since 2010. Minivans and Priuses get hit the hardest. So I want to know, as a resident, what you do here for me before we do for all of this stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate those questions. My name is Brad. I live in the neighborhood. I'm going to have a presentation a little bit later, so we'll follow up on some of these questions. So the first question was about sidewalk bicycle riding and scooter riding. I think it's really important to note, folks, our goal is to make it so safe on streets that people don't have incentives to ride bikes and scooters on sidewalks. Right now, we have regulations on the books that prohibit sidewalk biking in central business districts like Davis Square, but not on regular residential streets like Powder House Boulevard. And yet, we see that kind of behavior all the time, and we see people feeling threatened. If somebody is walking or using a wheeled mobility device like a wheelchair or a scooter or a stroller, they have a legitimate concern about somebody biking, menacing them. And I'm sorry that you've had that experience. I've experienced it too, and it frustrates me as well, because I think that we're actually all in this together, and when folks are arguing for different safety treatments, it's unfortunate that we kind of slip into this little tribal dynamic of somebody saying, oh, it's all about the cars. Don't ever put any blame on anybody riding a bike or a scooter. So we're trying to bridge those gaps. We use education, we use enforcement, we do mailers, we do signage, and our police department actually does educational citations and stops. Deputy Chief Donovan can speak about some of those, and yet these challenges are perpetual. You're absolutely right. So your point's a good one. It is something that we experience as well, and we're trying to get our arms around it to educate folks. The same thing happens on the community path, right? Same thing happens at our red lights and our stop signs. And look, it can be safer for a bike rider to get out of the way by, stopping at a red light and then keeping moving safely. But the minute there's a pedestrian anywhere nearby, our reaction is that's inappropriate, it's unsafe, it's disrespectful, it's selfish, and we really want to stop that behavior. So I'm acknowledging your points and letting you know that from an enforcement standpoint, it's really tricky. So we're going to keep working on education and keep trying to keep building safer streets so people can scoot and bike on the street. Second question was about speed humps. We'll talk about those in a little bit more detail. You're absolutely right. This Powder House Boulevard ones are much larger out front of the school here than they are more recently in other places that we've built, like over by the community garden. So we work with our fire department, our DPW, and others to try to find the right height for the right streets. And generally, we are using a smaller specification than we have on places like Powder House and Morrison Ave. Those were the first generation of speed hump. Many of you remember Allison Donovan and the crash that took her life on the front steps of this school. We are committed to saving lives. Speed humps save lives, and yet they can be a nuisance in terms of noise and bottoming out. So we will look for opportunities to fine-tune those heights, but it's not going to happen overnight. So again, I want to validate what you're saying, acknowledge that it must be frustrating as heck, but we also know that these things are evidence-based and they have saved lives all throughout Somerville. The new ones that we are building are a little bit smaller than those. Jim, anything else you want to add on the enforcement question?
Nothing really to add right now. We're going to address Davis Square on a whole separate slide with Health and Human Services too, so just stand by on that. If you have any questions after that, I'll be here as well.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you all for your questions. And next, I would like to welcome Rich Raich up to the stage. He's our Director of Infrastructure and Asset Management.
So before we move entirely off of infrastructure, we've got one more thing to sort of brag about here, right in Ward 7. For many years, in fact, even decades, we had a real foolproof way to figure out what pipes needed to be replaced. Anyone care to guess what that way was? Let them collapse and then do an emergency repair. And by foolproof, I mean foolish, because it costs about 10 times as much to repair a pipe under an emergency condition as it does if you plan for that. So for the past about 5 years, we've been sending remote controlled cameras down to the sewers to identify which ones have cracks, which ones we can rehabilitate trenchlessly, which ones we need to dig and replace. We've been doing that for about 4 years, and this year we moved over into Ward 7. So a lot of people on North and West Adams and West Quincy, we've been doing a lot of pipelining and some dig and replace down there. We appreciate your patience as we have been doing that, but this was actually the first time out of that 4 or 5 year program where we actually incorporated green stormwater infrastructure as well. Most of the city is combined sewer, meaning that both the stormwater and sanitary goes in the same pipe. There are a few locations here in Ward 7 that have separate stormwater that outfalls directly to the alewife. And that is actually the subject of the administrative order that the mayor mentioned earlier. So this bioretention basin that is being installed down at the bottom of Fairfax actually is one of the strategies to help us comply with those federal limitations on phosphorus and sediment that we discharge into the alewife. So this is the first time we're incorporating this sort of thing into a pipeline rehab. Everyone thought we were crazy to do it. But again, Somerville leads the way in this sort of thing, and I plan on teaching my MWRA buddies about this kind of contract as well. Any questions specifically about the Fairfax bump out or any of that pipeline rehab that we just finished in Ward 7? Great, thank you. So
Can you
that,
tell us what it is? Because
yeah.
I am sure I'm not alone in not knowing what that is.
it's still, into this microphone? Yes. I've never been told I was too quiet. So this is still in construction right now. So an interesting thing about green stormwater infrastructure, that it isn't just green, it's also infrastructure. So once this thing is all done, it will look like a grassed or vegetated bump out, almost like traffic control that just has some vegetation in it. Usually something that's close to a native species, but also sort of drought tolerant and able to tolerate a range of different water conditions. It can be dry for a while, it can be very wet. But what you see on the surface hides what's under the surface, is that a good portion of the benefit we get from green stormwater infrastructure is the loose gravel underneath that has a lot of voids, so that more stormwater can go in there and get retained under that bump out and percolate into the ground. So there's a lower volume of stormwater that makes its way out into the Alewife Brook. So this is just part one. Well, it'll get green. This is the infrastructure part. The green will come later. Annalyn?
So this looks great. What is the city's plan to address, I guess, I would love to have this on my street because it floods all the time. I live on Bromfield Road. So is there a plan to address, I guess, flooding and infrastructure like sewer or sewage infrastructure throughout the city? And I'd like Bromfield Road to be.
Yeah, Bromfield is going to be really tough. So we currently have a two-part plan. And actually there's a handout over here that says like my wet basement or something like that. You can pick that up and you can take the QR code and there's a lot more information on what we're doing there. We did a citywide drainage master plan that looked specifically at flooding. We are also, as the mayor mentioned, negotiating and well, we hope it will be a consent order because that implies that we agree with them and we're going to do what they want. It could just be an enforcement order and they make us do what they want us to do. We have to reconcile that with the combined sewer overflows because, as I said earlier, most of our city has combined sewer that then leads into, when it rains very heavily, we have raw sewage that spills into the Alewife and the Mystic. Cambridge has it into the Charles and the Alewife as well, so we're jointly working on this. Which is a long way to say that the long-term plans for Somerville, which will include reducing CSOs and reducing flooding, are still being negotiated with the federal EPA and DEP. But we do have generally the idea for what can be done in each section of the city, which is why the Poplar Street Pump Station is under control, because that is the solution for a lot of the low-lying areas in Ward 2. As a matter of fact, that picture that the mayor put up, those workers doing that was in one impressive 23-hour shift. That slab had to be one continuous concrete pour, so they went at it for 23 straight hours and got that thing done. It was awesome. And we're working on an outfall to the Mystic River that will alleviate flooding in the Foss Park area. Bromfield is even trickier. It ties into what we call the Tannery Brook drain, which we're currently collaborating with Cambridge to see if we can jointly come up with a solution for that. There isn't a Somerville-only solution for that area. We actually have to share some space on Mass Ave in Cambridge, which helps Cambridge too. So we're exploring the idea of a joint project that will help Cambridge and Somerville, and we've got great partners in Cambridge. They do make us pay for our portion. You know, I joke every time we have a meeting that they should pay the consultants, but we're collaborating on that one. So hopefully by the end of next year, we'll have a much better picture of citywide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rich. Now I'd like to invite Roberta Cameron up to the podium. She can talk about the Community Preservation Act.
Thank you so much, everyone, for giving me the time, the opportunity to come and talk with you about the Community Preservation Act. Now, first, I want to make no assumptions that anybody knows what I'm talking about. Who in the room has never heard of the Community Preservation Act? I will not be offended if you raise your hand. Great. So I will start at the beginning and explain what it is and how we got here and why I'm here today. So the Community Preservation Act is a program that was enabled by the state legislature back in 2000. Communities who want to can opt to place a small tax on themselves through a surcharge on local property taxes that is used by the community itself to pay for open space, outdoor recreation, historic preservation, and affordable housing projects. So Somerville voters in a general election voted back in 2012 to adopt the Community Preservation Act. And when Somerville adopted the Community Preservation Act, they opted for a 1.5% surcharge on local property tax bills. That was half of what they could have adopted at the time. The maximum that the state allows is a 3% surcharge on local property tax bills. So I will come back to that in a moment. Since Somerville adopted the Community Preservation Act in 2012, it took a little while to get up and running. They had to pass a local ordinance, appoint a committee that has the responsibility to make decisions about how to spend this money that's collected. And so the committee really began its work in 2014. So 2024, we are now celebrating 10 years of the Community Preservation Act program and celebrating really important work that we've done in 10 years. The city has raised about $24 million in local revenue, which has been matched by state funds over this time of about $7 million that the state has given us over the last 10 years. Community preservation projects are a lot of expensive projects. So the little bit that the city puts into these projects is often matched by funding from other sources. In all, the Community Preservation Act has generated about over $300 million in funding from other sources that have been leveraged by the city's funds. What have we done? We have contributed to the creation of over 80 affordable housing units so far, and there's over 150 more affordable housing units in the pipeline right now, including at the Clarendon Hill redevelopment site is one of the sites that CPA funds have helped to facilitate, as well as the development of the Mystic Waterworks, 25 units of senior housing down the road here. And the CPA funds have supported housing assistance programs administered by the Somerville Housing Coalition, Somerville Community Corporation, CAS, and other partner organizations. These are monies that help to keep people in their homes who are in danger of being displaced. We have expanded and improved open space and parks and schoolyards, including the West Somerville Neighborhood School was a CPA-funded project. The Dillboy Auxiliary Fields, CPA paid for the design, and thanks to the design that the CPA funds paid for, the city was able to use funding from other sources to make that project come to completion. The CPA funds helped to build the Luann David Park near Davis Square as well. Those are the examples I can think of in this neighborhood right off the top of my head. And some of the work that I'm really proud of, in addition to preserving iconic Somerville landmarks such as the Prospect Hill Tower that is depicted on this slide, our funds have gone to make old buildings, which Somerville has a lot of really old buildings, actually functional today, making them safe and accessible. For example, the West Branch Library, our funding helped to put an elevator in that library and to bring the library up to modern standards. And there are several other buildings in the city, the Somerville Museum, for example, that we've also been able to do similar work in renovating those buildings. So it's a resource that we have for helping the public building stock that we, public, private, nonprofit building stock that we have, to bring it into our current day standards. So the other part of why I'm here today is to bring to your attention that there is going to be a question on the ballot this November pertaining to the Community Preservation Act. Question 6 on the ballot asks, should Somerville increase the surcharge from 1.5% of property tax bills to 3% of property tax bills? So this will obviously double the funds that are available. Right now, we have about $3 million a year. And if you recall the numbers that the mayor spoke about earlier of what it actually costs to do the work that we need across the city, it's a very small drop in the bucket. But it's a very important drop in the bucket because of the way that it leverages, it unlocks funding from other sources. So it really helps Somerville to be able to access the resources to be able to solve some of these problems. So the budget would go from $3 million a year up to $6 million a year with this ballot question. And it would also, of course, increase the state funding by more than doubling the state funding that we get for the money that Somerville puts on the table. So how is this going to impact property taxpayers? We have numbers on our webpage, which there's a QR code that goes to if you want to have more detail. But in summary, the average owner-occupied condo, this is all numbers given to us by the assessor, looking at what the average residences are by type of use across the city, would see an annual increase of about $38 a year. The average owner-occupied single family, and these are assuming with the residential exemption, would see an increase of $93 per year. And very importantly, low-income homeowners, property owners across the city, and low and moderate income seniors are eligible to apply for exemptions from the Community Preservation Act surcharge on the property tax bill. They can apply annually to the assessor to be exempted, and we're trying to make the information about how to apply for those exemptions to be very easy to find so that you can access those. The next slide, I am putting what those numbers are, what qualifies as low-income property owners and low and moderate income seniors. These are at 80% of area median income for all property owners and 100% of area median income for seniors. So it's a more generous allowance for exemptions than what some of the other exemptions are available for property taxes. And with that, that's everything that I brought to present to you. Are there questions?
How many of the units that you contributed toward the creation of or assisted in helping, how many of them are new? Because the Clarendon ones are just replacement units, they're not new.
So CPA funds can only go toward new units, not toward replacement. So at Clarendon, there's a combination of replacement, some new affordable units, and some new market rate units as part of the whole plan. And the CPA funding has gone to support the new affordable units, not the replacement ones. Yeah. And there's another question here. Yeah.
Is this a binding question? I'm not sure.
Yes, so the way that the CPA legislation works, that is given to us by the state, the way that the city can change its Community Preservation Act adoption at all is through the general election. So it's not, the city council can approve the individual funding projects that are recommended by the committee every year, But to change the overall funding amount or exemptions or anything about those adoption choices that we made back in 2012 has to go through the general election, and just the general election, not the city council or the mayor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roberta. Next up, we have Brad Rawson, our Director of Mobility.
Thanks, Christine. Hi again, everybody. Appreciate you being here. My name's Brad Rawson. I'm a Somerville resident. I'm a Ward 7 resident. I'm a proud parent in the Somerville Public Schools, the amazing Somerville Public Schools, and this one in particular. Just 6 or 8 hours ago, my little guy was eating lunch in this cafeteria. Thanks for being here to contribute to our community dialogue. So the team that I am a part of is part of about an 80 or 85 person community development office. Many of you know this, but for all of our first timers and newer participants, the Office of Strategic Planning and Community Development is an 85 person group that includes, no exaggeration, 30 affordable housing specialists dealing with issues like Roberta was just talking about, 12 small business, workforce development, and real estate development specialists. Chadi introduced himself earlier. He's part of that team. We have 7 or 8 landscape architects, parks project managers, certified arborists, part of that team. So John is here. He'll be speaking a little bit later. So you kind of get the point. It's a really interdisciplinary group that really focuses on community development in all its forms. The little 8-person team that I lead is focused on mobility. That is everything from building the Green Line extension and the community path to helping our buses run on time, to making sure that we've got transit passes in the pockets of our grade 7 through 12 public school students, and tonight's topic, which is street safety. Folks who have come to these ward-based community meetings for many years will know that there are like 3 perennial issues you can always expect to hear about. Rodents, so Alicia and her colleagues will always be talking about rodents in these meetings. You will always hear about flooding, so Rich and Gina and their colleagues will always be talking about flooding. And my colleagues and I will always be talking about street safety. This is not because we want to, it's because you want us to. These are the things that we hear about through our 311 hotlines, as Ed will tell you, from the 311 team. City councilors like Judy and Kristen and Jake and Will and all of them, they are constantly relaying your concerns that you feel unsafe on our streets. How can the city do something about this? So we're going to provide you probably about 5 minutes of content, take a couple of questions, and then I'll stick around afterwards for additional questions afterward. So good news, many of you have lived through the construction impacts of Powder House Boulevard and Alewife Brook Parkway. It is a modern miracle that the city of Somerville, through its activists and its elected officials, convinced the state agency at DCR to let us pursue such a radical redesign of the horrible, unsafe, high-speed rotary that used to separate our neighborhoods from the Dillboy and the Alewife greenways, from the stadium, from the pool, from the fields, from the jogging and walking paths. We are so proud that we have turned this into a slower, safer intersection with legitimate crosswalks. Folks, how many years did you ask questions of us on these podiums and say, when's that push button yellow light going to start working? When am I going to stop feeling like my kiddos are going to get run over as we try to get to swim camp? Okay, so we're at the very end. Contractor is still under contract. We're just doing the final testing of the signals, of the signs, of the pavement markings. But we really appreciate everybody, particularly those on the rotary, the old rotary itself, who have lived through that construction impact. And more to follow. We know that the DCR needs to continue working with us on the corner of Broadway, on the corner of Boston Avenue, at High Street by the stadium. We hope that this is a template that gets them more comfortable with pedestrian-focused designs. Another one that we want to highlight that many of you have advocated for many, many years is Cameron Avenue. So obviously that is a regional cut-through route with a lot of traffic, with a lot of speeding, with bad crashes every now and then, particularly at Tannery Brook. And so again, based on your feedback, the data that we have collected, the city has been able to grow its capacity to design and build raised intersections. So just over the next couple of weeks, you can expect our contractor to mobilize to the corner of Cameron and Tannery Brook and start building a raised crosswalk. We flyered the neighborhood, so if any of you live down that neighborhood, hopefully you've seen the flyers on the telephone poles. We're trying to do a better job of communicating the construction schedules, the impacts, and the trade-offs for you all, because again, we know that we are being asked to deliver more and more of these safety interventions, but living through construction is hard. Dealing with the impacts of sometimes slower driving or noise impacts, as we talked about a minute ago, is legitimate. We want to communicate the why, the when, and the how, so look for that work coming to Ward 7 in the very near future. Next slide, please, Victoria. So I don't say this lightly, folks, our work is achieving the desired results. All across America, we have a traffic safety catastrophe. 43,000 Americans are killed on roads every year. It's a shocking number. Massachusetts is better than some states, but not all. Somerville is moving the needle. Because we are building traffic calming, because we are building separated bike facilities, we are reducing not only the number of all crashes, but the severity of the crashes. But we try to actually use evidence to make sure that our tools are getting the desired results. So here you see on the left, the overall reported crashes in Somerville. You see a broad trend line over the last decade or so. And the right-hand graph, that line graph, shows pedestrian-involved crashes. Both are moving in the right direction. And yet we have a lot of work to do. Just in the last week, we had 3 reports of pedestrian and bike crashes. So despite the great work that we are doing, there is still too much risk on our streets. This line right here, 2023 records for pedestrian-involved crashes, it was still 20. And obviously, 2019, that horrific year when Allison's crash occurred and Cheryl Richards was killed over in East Somerville, that was a real spike on that graph. The overall trend line is down, but 20 is not good enough. These numbers have to go to 0. We can't have people dying on our streets. We can't have people suffering life-altering injuries on our streets. So more to come. Next slide, please. The mayor mentioned this. She, upon entering office, said, Brad, how can we deliver more safety projects? And so between Rich's team and mine, Chief Breen's team, Deputy Chief Donovan's team, we are working to try to really increase the production rates. This graph represents how we've been able to build more curb extensions, more raised crosswalks, more raised intersections, more speed humps, and even little neighborhood traffic circles around schools in East Somerville. So we're constantly testing, we're constantly refining, and we know that these are really evidence-based solutions to try to reduce risk on our streets. I can't wait to see what our 2024 production rates look like. The mayor always talks about scaling our organization. So although engineering and mobility and fire are often the more visible parts of the organization, our communications team is critical. Our procurement team is critical. Our law office is critical. It really does take a village to try to move the needle here and keep our residents safe. So how do we get involved? How do you stay plugged in? In addition to building more stuff, we are also communicating the intent and the results. So we've got a great new communications capacity these last 5 years. Folks know that not only will we do the night meetings in middle school cafeterias like this one, which really serve some parts of our community well, but really exclude others. You work 2 jobs, you've got a bunch of family caregiving responsibilities, English is not your first language. Community meetings are not always the best tool to be participating in local civics, right? So what we do to complement the traditional community meetings is have an increased web presence, increased multilingual presence. We bring the content to the people. We flyer at bus stops. We door knock at small businesses. We show up and table at school, back to school nights and arrival dismissal. We are constantly trying to bring the content to the people, particularly those who have faced structural disadvantages to participating in our local government. So we've got a great website that explains the traffic calming program, a great interactive map that helps us plan a couple of years ahead, and great ways for you to then advocate for your neighbors, for your neighborhood, and try to get projects onto those pipelines. So again, please follow these links. And then the last slide I'll reference before I take a couple of questions is a couple of signature projects in and around the Ward 7 neighborhood. Hopefully many of you have been involved with us over the last year on our West Broadway reconstruction project. The sidewalks on West Broadway need to be brought into accessible ADA compliance. They need to be rebuilt for smooth, passable travel. We need to improve traffic calming. We need to improve bus run times and reliability. We need to provide safe places for people to bike. So we're about a year into our community engagement process. You can find all of the documentation from that process online. Everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly, the name calling, which happens as you would expect, shows up in these community engagement reports. So you can see it all verbatim, and that helps you understand how our team is able to prioritize within that limited project budget and scope to start building the Broadway of the future. So we're super excited about that. Can I just finish up by asking for a quick show of hands? We talked about construction impacts. Who receives the city's construction newsletter? Okay. Please follow these links. Please sign up for the construction newsletter. Who receives the mobility division monthly newsletter? Kind of about the same ratio. Folks, please, just log on. We take this stuff really, really seriously. We really want to be communicating with you and providing you timely opportunities to be involved in these types of issues. So, yeah, let's stay the course, keep showing up, and we really appreciate your attention and your advocacy. Changing the status quo is hard, but please know, fatal pedestrian crashes, feeling menaced on sidewalks and on streets, that is not an inevitability. That is the result of public policy decisions. We either decide that it's okay to feel unsafe in our communities, or we decide to do something about it. I've been serving this great city for 17 years, and this community has told me over and over again that we're fed up with it, and we're going to change the status quo. So let's stay involved and remember that we're all neighbors. Thank you.
I have a question on your first slide, the Powerhouse at Life crossing.
Please.
So it's nice now, it's finally paved all the way, the bike path there, it's paved all the way down, and it's paved across. Is there any sensor for cyclists? Because there's a big button for the pedestrians, but you can't reach it from the bike path.
So, great question. Just to make sure everybody heard, the question was about how you activate the signal as a pedestrian or as a bike rider. That is something that we're going to have to add after the fact. That was not a part of the original project design. We've noticed as staff, we've heard about it from users and residents and activists, as well as city councilors. So we'll be working on it. It may take a little while, but yes, that is part of our next stage. Let's take one more, and then I know these are hot topics, and I'll stick around after.
I think you do a great job. Coupled with the safety is some level of enforcement. And that's my big concern, okay? Again, they got killed in Davis Square at least 4 times by bikes. I've seen people on bikes, on their cell phones, okay? Headphones on, no clue. I've walked the bike trail, okay, the rail trail. Nobody announces when you're behind you. All you have to do is take one step to the left, you're dead, okay? There was a time when someone came up behind you and said, on your left, on your right. I don't do that. So what about enforcement? I mean, what's being done about that?
Deputy, you want to come up and kind of chime in here? So again, great points. Somerville Police Department does enforcement. This tends to be controversial, as you would expect, and we hear from 50% of our residents who say we don't want that, and 50% who say we want that. So we're trying to make sure that everybody behaves appropriately in terms of passing, in terms of education, in terms of enforcement, but it's a tricky puzzle. The cultural norms about like ringing a bell or saying on your left, again, for me, that's common courtesy, and it surprises me here in Somerville that that's actually not part of our culture yet. So now we're 1.5 years into the community path reality. We're working on PSAs, messaging, and education to try to change some of those norms. Jim, anything you want to add on the enforcement question?
That's a great question. We get that question a lot at the community meetings. We do bike enforcement. I was on the radio listening to the radio the other day. One of our traffic officers was off with a cyclist on College Ave at Pothole Circle. I will say we had a road safety grant this year, and our city council was very strict on not including bike enforcement in that. So I encourage you to reach out to your city councilors, your at-large councilors as well, to encourage them. We're going to be coming before them again next year with the same grant. And they control that, whether they approve that grant or not. And we did have some bicycle enforcement, education, not even enforcement, education in there. And the city council was opposed to us having that in the grant. So we really encourage you to reach out to your city council and voice your opinion. But we do some enforcement. It does happen. And we realize that, as a congested city with a lot of cyclists. I'm sorry, ma'am? I can only take questions, just to be fair to everybody, take questions via the microphone. We do enforcement. Our traffic unit is out there doing enforcement.
We will have a general Q&A at the end of all of the presentations. In order to stay on schedule.
We always come back to those.
I'll be taking 2 questions at the end of my presentation.
So next, I would like to invite our Deputy Director of Health and Human Services, Kelly Highland, Mayor Valentine, and Deputy Chief Donovan to provide an update on the unhoused population.
As many of you know, we've certainly seen an increase in people experiencing homelessness in Somerville. I know that a lot of you have contacted us here in about Seven Hills specifically. But before I get into any points, I want to be really clear It's not acceptable for this situation for either those who have nowhere to sleep, nor for residents who are worried about their safety, trying to navigate our public spaces. We are fully focused on both those aspects of the issue. That's ensuring that we are doing our best to connect our most vulnerable populations to resources like food, shelter, permanent housing, rehab, employment, and other supports, all of which give them an option than having to sleep or spend their days without a place to go. And that we're ensuring that our neighborhoods are safe for all use, that parents can get to and from daycare without worrying about public drug use or threatening behavior, that pedestrians can feel safe in our parks and on our paths. We are just as focused on patrolling the parks to addressing concerning activity as we are to conducting outreach so that those residents have better options. The Somerville Police Department has conducted 43 directed patrols in the area of Seven Hills and Davis Square Plaza just since Sunday. Their presence is helping to reduce neighborhood impacts, build connections, and they also help connect residences to resources. When needed, they've made arrests, not for homelessness, that's not a crime, but for drug distribution or other violations. I've been walking the area myself. I walk it at a minimum of once a day, sometimes twice a day. I change it up. The earliest I've been is 6 o'clock in the morning, and the latest I've been is 10:30 at night. Recently, I have seen improvements, but obviously there's so much more to do. We have set up an interdepartmental emergency incident command to address all needs, be that trash pickup, police support, harm reduction efforts, health outreach, and more. Meanwhile, our city community health workers, so those are 3 new staff people that we added to our public health department, and our community partner on homelessness is the Somerville Homeless Coalition, are working hard to intensify the outreach and to address immediate concerns and the deeper issues for these residents. You'll hear more about that from Kelly Hyland from our health department and Deputy Chief Donovan. For now, I just want to be clear. We have a rising homelessness issue nationwide, statewide, and in Somerville. Massachusetts is in a declared state of emergency because of our emergency shelters are full. Since day one, my administration has been working to grow our resources for our unhoused in multiple fronts. Be that supporting our local shelter or helping them expand, funding a daytime engagement center, social services support, prevention services, food access, or more. The goal was to drive down the blue line on this graph that shows the number of unhoused residents we identify in our annual count. Broader circumstances in our society have taken those efforts, and instead we're seeing a rise. We are working with full focus to address the new challenge with all our residents in mind. That includes both those who are unhoused and everybody who lives here. With that, I am going to turn it over to Deputy Chief Donovan and Kelly to speak more in their respective areas.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I could just have the police slide up there. I apologize. I just got the slides later, and I want to make sure. I have different data. Just to provide you with some data, we do recognize there's a problem in Davis Square, obviously. And what have we been doing? Since August 22nd to today, we've done 450 directed patrols. What's a directed patrol? That's an officer that either gets out of their car, drives by, or parks there for a significant period of time. It's 450 directed patrols in 30 days. That's 15 times a day. That's being done all 3 shifts, our day shift, our evening shift, and our overnight shift. The city of Somerville is broken up by the police department into wards, political wards. We have 7 ward cars. We have east and west. Wards 5, 6, and 7 are our west cars. All 3 west cars have been directed to Davis Square for resources. We've conducted 96 park walk and talks. What that is, it's a directed patrol on steroids. The officers are encouraged, are told to get out of their vehicles, walk the park, walk the community path, walk Seven Hills, walk Statue Park, and, interact with people, interact with the citizens, interact with our unhoused, see if people need services. Significant amount of time we've spent in that area. In addition to the patrol force, which I command, we've also had detectives down there. They've been conducting surveillance and made 3 narcotics arrests out of Davis Square. So right now, we recognize there is an issue in Davis Square, and we directed a ton of resources down there. I'll be giving a presentation after this from the police perspective as to just crime data. I'm going to take some questions after that, but I won't leave tonight until everyone's questions are answered after the presentations, I promise.
Thank you. Everyone hear me okay? I'm Kelly Highland, Deputy Director of Public Health for Health and Human Services. And so our approach in working with the unhoused is to use a data and evidence-informed approach. This ensures that we're using our resources effectively and that we're also meeting the needs of the community at large and the folks that we are supporting. And all of this work is also done under a public safety lens as well. We know that this work impacts your neighborhood, and we are actively engaging with individuals and our partners to ensure that we have a space for everyone where they feel safe and welcome. So some of the current initiatives that come out of the HHS department is that we have a weekly interagency meeting that discusses short and long-term solutions. There's alignment of policy and advocacy work at the state level, and then coordinating our communication internally and externally to you all. And as the mayor mentioned, our division of community health workers conduct direct engagement with individuals, particularly in the Davis Square area. We were out there today. And so they're building trust with the individuals. They're connecting them to resources, to the SHC Engagement Center. And we also offer backpacks with basic need and harm reduction supplies. We also work on a Narcan and overdose prevention training for community members and businesses alike, and that across the city. The team, the CHWs, also became certified application counselors. So now when they're doing direct outreach with individuals, they can on the spot enroll them or start the process of enrolling them in Mass Health. And so that will help kind of improve health outcomes, get them connected and access to health care to address any underlying needs they may have. And so all of this work we can't do. We're not solely the experts in the room, so we engage a lot with the folks that live and breathe this work, our partners at Somerville Homeless Coalition, at Fenway Health, at CASPAR. So all those folks are kind of a part of this kind of solution as we work towards it. So some upcoming efforts. This will be our 3rd year in offering an overnight warming center in the city to act as a safe space for our unhoused for overnight. We are working on installing a dual sharps container or kiosk in the Seven Hills Park area to help encourage folks to properly dispose of their sharps that they're using. This is also available for anyone who have home use sharps as well. So the kiosk offers a slot for individually single use sharps, so needles and syringes. It also has a like a pull down door for sharps that you keep in those red puncture proof containers. Our nursing division works closely with our partners and strategically meets folks where they're at in the community to offer flu and COVID vaccines this fall. And then also late this fall, our CHWs will become SNAP outreach providers, which gives us a direct line to the DTA to be able to enroll folks in SNAP benefits and increase their food access for that. And I think to kind of echo what the mayor said, we understand that this is a hugely complex issue. Homelessness wasn't something that happened overnight, and so our solution cannot be an overnight solution. We are taking steps from every angle to address all of your concerns and also weigh the value of the individuals who are in these unfortunate circumstances. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. I've lived in Somerville, actually, on camera now since 2000 and in Union Square since 1990, so I've been here a very long time. I also have a German Shepherd, and I've had 3 of them, and I've walked the bike path since 2000. This is the first time in my life that I have felt nervous walking, and I have a big German Shepherd, she's 80 pounds, and I walk at 5 in the morning, and it's like I have seen homeless throughout the whole time, and I have never felt anxious before. But the congregation of the people using and shooting up right in front of me are really like concerning. And I don't go all the way to the T-stop, but I go like to Thank you for the hump. That's really great. I've been wanting that since 2000. It's so great having little kids all around on camera now. I just have to say, it's fucking beautiful. So I just want to say too, I've called about lights, I've called 311, the lights that I call it the gauntlet, it's that like the new path mark, construction, those lights are out. I have called about the lights, it would be super great if they could be replaced. Second, I think it would be wonderful to have more garbage cans. There's so much garbage everywhere now on the bike path. I don't know if you guys have noticed that, it's really yucky. I found my first pink syringe today, and that's why I really wanted to be here. And it's not like the whole, I'm not, I don't feel like they're going to come up. No, actually, it was one time when they were like living around there with the, on the benches, and it was really scary, actually, if they wanted money and whatever. But that was 5 in the morning. So I guess for police officers, I am the person who calls when people are out on the street, I am that person who calls, the EMTs to come, even though many people do just walk right by them. I do call. But I just want to say that I think this is really difficult, and if you think about like what kind of community we have, it's really hard for the people that are here being like wanting to be of service and wanting to help, but also feeling like I want to be safe. So anyway, that's the thing I want to say.
I'm sorry. We hear you. We hear you. When we met with Chief Femino, just so by way of introduction, our new chief, Shumaine Benford, is here tonight. He did want to speak, but we want to keep him, so we're not going to throw him to the wolves just yet. But we hear you. And when we met with Chief Femino back in August to plan this, our concern was for the unhoused, but it was also for the safety of the residents. It's a park, it's a bike path, everyone has access to it, everyone should be able to use it. We're not going to criminalize homelessness. We defer on making drug possession arrests because it is a public health issue more than a criminal issue. We do address distribution, obviously. We're not going to tolerate it. We're also not going to tolerate unacceptable behavior, and that's what we're looking for as well. So, you do see my officers down there. We are there all the time. I drove through there tonight on my way home from work, and there was an officer parked there doing his reports. You know, we do our reports in our car, and I encourage my officers, when you're doing your reports, whatever from your shift, you know, park down there in a visible spot and do your reports. So we hear you, we do. It's not an overnight solution, it's not an overnight fix. For us, it's been about 30 or 45 days. Maybe it's been more for people who live down there and see it more. But, you know, it's not an overnight fix, but we are working towards it.
I was curious if you could explain how the decision gets made when somebody calls in to the business line and says they see something really distressing. An example that I'll offer is recently my husband and I were walking along the bottom of Route 16 towards Dilboy, and there was an unhoused person. Well, he was sort of housed because he was living in his van. He was clearly high as a kite. He was very menacing. He was screaming. He had run in and out of traffic 5 or 6 times, nearly crashing cars or killing himself. Everybody was crossing the road to try to get away from him. He was terrified. We called and we stood and we waited. Nothing. Nothing. So what do you have to report to get somebody to come and address a person who's that menacing?
So I'm sorry for that situation. That should never happen. Where that may have happened, and it's no excuse, is if that was on state police property, it would have been routed to state police. You know, routes on route. I completely understand, and we normally should send a car in that situation, and we should have. But I will say, is calls like that on Route 16 are automatically routed to the state police. Like every police department, the state police is running on bare bones. You get in a minor motor vehicle accident, you can wait 2 hours for the state police. So we should have responded in that situation, given the emergency of it. And you know, if you want, you know, stay after, I'll get the time and date, and I can look into it more. Cause I'd like, well, but just for as a training matter, I'd like to go back over that and make sure that doesn't happen again.
Thank you. So that's it for the 2 questions on that segment. I would just like to remind everyone that there is going to be a general question answer segment at the end of all presentations. So if you didn't get to ask your question now, you will towards the end. And with that, I would like to welcome Deputy Chief Donovan right back up to the microphone.
I'm staying. You can't get rid of me. Just by way of introduction, I know many faces here, some new faces. My name's Jim Donovan. I'm a Deputy Chief in charge of operations for the police department, and that's basically the men and women you see in uniform. I spent my first 34 years of my life as a Ward 7 resident. I lived on TL Ave. My mom's 92. She's still up there. She's been in the city of Somerville for 74 years since she came to this country when she was 18 years old. So in my mind, don't tell the other wards, but Ward 7 definitely has my attention and my heart. You know, gotta protect I was going to my mother tonight and have her sit there so no one would give me a hard time, but it's a good crowd. So we're going to do some of the crime stats and try to burn through this a little bit. We did see an increase of 10% citywide in crime. Not great, but nationally we are seeing an increase in crime across the board. We are coming out of COVID where we saw historic lows in crime. Ward 7, we can say we saw a 4% decrease, which is great, a 4% increase as compared to the 10%, which is great. Also included in that is that our violent crimes in Ward 7 were down 26%. It was our property crimes that drove that increase. And by way of property crimes, as you can see, we had 13 car breaks. Something simple as a car break, that's 1 a month, can drive those statistics up. And also for car breaks, a lot of times you see a rash of car breaks over one evening. You may have some juveniles that break into 4 or 5 or 10 cars on a street. That drives our stats right through the roof. So when your numbers are relatively low, any crime is going to drive your numbers up. The math that I can't follow. What do we do when we do see these crime spikes, which we do see them, we do track them through our crime analysis unit? We move our resources. Just like we're doing at Davis Square, we'll move car 5, car 6, car 7, and we'll move them to address those different crime sprees or hotspots. At roll call, every shift, we give out our directed patrols, but we also give out the crime data. We're seeing an increase in crime on We'll say Teal Ave, where I grew up. So we'll tell the officers in the area, this is where we want to focus. And residential awareness, usually move over here. Residential awareness, we encourage everyone to report crimes. I can't tell you, when my office in Teal Square, when I was a captain a few months ago, people would stop by and say, hey, my car was broken into, and the first thing I would say to them is, did you report it? We don't have a crystal ball. We need your input, we need your help. You know, policing is a partnership, and we need the community to partner with us and tell us where this stuff's happening so we can direct our resources. As far as community awareness, we have put all our crime data on our webpage. It is 1 month in arrears, and that's for investigative purposes. There's certain things we can't release to the public until we do more follow-up. So, but you can look at all our data online now for you data people. As far as increasing community awareness, during one of our meetings last year, we got beat up pretty bad up in Ward 4. We had a shooting up in Ward 4 last year, and the residents there were like, why didn't you tell us right away? Why didn't you tell us right away? We weren't notified till days later. We hear you. We're listening. That's why we come here. What do? We changed our method. We're definitely more conscious of our neighborhoods. There are times when we cannot share that information because it's an active crime, but there are times when we can do better, and we are doing better. And these are some examples of how we're sharing information across the community through the community alerts, which you can get on your phones when you apply for them. As far as building trust and legitimacy, some things we have done to be more part of the community and increasing our community presence is a community affairs unit. We created a community affairs unit. Right now it's 2 officers and a sergeant. They go to over 30 events in the community every month. As you see, on the next slide, on the next page down that slide is National Night Out. What National Night Out is a community event run by the police to build camaraderie among neighbors and the police department. We had it down at Trum Field. I'm down at Dilboy Field this year. It was supposed to be at Trum, it was moved because of the rain. We had a great response from the community. As you can see, the handsome young gentleman in the dunk tank is myself. I'm really glad I put that slide in there. Crowd Analysis will lose their job now. And our Junior Police Academy, which we've done a few years now running, it's very popular. We run this through the Recreation Department. I believe we had 22 participants this year. They did things like CPR. We had the Boston Police come over and do a drone demonstration. We had a dive team, show them how a dive team works at the Kennedy Pool. And then they all learned CPR and first aid, among other things. And they also went to a Red Sox game at the end of the week. Next slide. Some ways to contact us. We are social media savvy. So if you want to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And there are ways to report a crime anonymously through our tip lines. Joining the SPD. This was my slide I asked to be put in this year. We are, like all employers, we need employees. Everyone's searching on employees. You see help wanted signs everywhere. We are not immune to that. So if you know someone that wants a career in law enforcement, if anyone here wants a career in law enforcement, approach me. I'll tell you how to go about it. There is a civil service test. There's a process. But we're in the process of hiring now, and we've gone through our list of Somerville residents. We want people from the community as members of our team. So really, if you have anyone in your family or anyone's here tonight that is interested in career in law enforcement and wants to know how to start or how to go about it, please have them reach out to us. We'd love to talk to them. And that's right now. I'll take 2 questions right now. Like I said, I will not leave until everyone's questions are answered tonight. Yes? Oh, wait for the microphone. I've been doing this for so long, I know first names.
So my question has to do with the people working the desk, and when we call, it's kind of like discouraging, or we're kind of makes it feel like we shouldn't be calling in the first place. So, for an example for you, this past weekend we had a whole bunch of packages stolen off people's porches, all along North Street, the side streets going towards Westford. I'm aware of this. I have a ring camera and have a ring app. I called the police department to let them know that the packages are being stolen by somebody who lives in Clarendon. And I know this because the people who had them stolen, their names are on the boxes, the empty boxes around my house. So, they literally were on my doorstep, and Sunday morning I go outside and there's an empty box, and then there's a box of baby wipes and diapers. Like, come on. But the response from the desk was, if there's no victim, there's no crime. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? This is what we're getting?
I apologize for that response. You shouldn't get that response. And again, I'd like to speak to you because I can follow up on that. I can pull the recording of the call, find out the officer that spoke to you, and we can have a training session with those officers.
But it's not even just that, just like, I'm the type of, parent who's like, get your supervisor, right? That's rude, get your supervisor. So then I also spoke to Lieutenant, and he made me feel like I was, like, interrupting him or such a burden for having even asked him to take the phone call, right? That is not the type of atmosphere that encourages people to call in the first place. Like, your response calls or reports of anything are probably much lower than what they actually would be if people felt like it was safe for them. And not even in a general, like, somebody's gonna come after me, but like, the police are gonna treat me like I'm crap. Like, that's the way that it is, or it has been most recently. It's not always like that, but it's definitely my experience more recently, and I don't know what you can do about that, but it'd be nice to do something.
Yeah, I'm sorry that was your experience. I tell my officers, especially if we have new officers, we don't create anything. We don't create, widgets, as I learned in my economics class. We don't create material product. We're customer service. We're a service provider in the city of Somerville. And I always remind my officers of that. We'll take that. Everything's a learning experience for us. Just like we were in Ward 4 last year, we heard from the community that we weren't, communicating quick enough after major events, and we changed and we pivoted. I'll take this to heart. I'll go back. I'll speak to my supervisors who supervises our station officers, our call takers, and make sure they're aware of, your response. But if we can connect, I would like to get the time, pull the tape rather, and use it as a training for my officers and for my 911 operators.
You know what my question was when you tried to ask this before. So I remember sitting right here, I think it was the other side of the table, a year or two ago, asking the numbers you presented. You even said they're kind of meaningless because the crime rate is so low that one extra crime blows the numbers.
I would never say crime's meaningless.
But
Never. We never say crime's meaningless.
No,
It's
not crime. But
one crime can skew the numbers.
Exactly. So you throw 4%, 10% up, and that may not be very helpful. But one thing that I didn't see on there is any mention of enforcement actions. So that could be cars running red lights or stop signs, cyclists running red lights and stop signs. I'm a cyclist myself. Everyone does it because it's not safe. So would it be possible to get better statistics here, or more statistics, not just crime, but also enforcement or education stops or calls for assistance or things like that? Like, what I'm trying to figure out is where is it safer to bike or safer to walk, or where do I have to be more careful when my kids are trying to bike? So like knowing that there's a bunch of car break-ins, like, okay, yes, I will lock my car at night, not leave anything valuable there. That's common sense. Knowing where to safely, common sense is not so common, but knowing where to safely plan to walk or bike when there's multiple ways to get different places is not always so obvious. And that's the kind of statistics that I really come here for tonight. So I'm a little disappointed because I know I've asked this question before, but maybe I'm the only one who cares.
No, we are limiting them as slides, and crime statistics are always the most important for most people. Is what's crime in my neighborhood? What kind of crime is in my neighborhood? But your question is a great question, and we can't provide that data. We do heat maps for our crime analysts, showing where vehicle accidents are, pedestrian accidents, and our cyclist accidents. And we wouldn't go with the enforcement information because we don't want to give away any secrets as to where we are. But that's what I think you're looking for. But we can add that slide next year. I'll make sure I do that. And you won't have to say that again. So I will be here for the rest of the night. If you have any questions, grab me on the way out. Thank you.
We're moving on to our final presentation of the evening from John Bronenkamp, a senior planner at our Public Space and Urban Forestry Division.
Good evening, everyone. My name is John Bronenkamp. I am with the Public Space and Urban Forestry Department. Our department is 7 staff members. Half of them are landscape architects, and the other half are urban foresters. So I am here to talk about Dilboy Auxiliary Fields project. You've probably seen all of the events going on at the field, and so I just wanted to give you guys a brief update about what's happening at the field. So just a quick reminder of why we're doing this work. The main point of this is to improve the drainage on the site. Back in 2018, we kind of did a fields master plan, assessing all of our different fields throughout the city and trying to increase the playability of these fields. We heard from the community that we want to move more towards natural grass fields, so the Dilbour Auxiliary Fields project was a great opportunity to implement that natural grass field while also improving the drainage. So the way we're accomplishing this is by implementing almost like a French drain around the perimeter of the site with these sand slits throughout the entirety of the field. These sand slits will kind of collect all of the rainwater and help drain the field quicker. This drainage will help increase the amount of time that we can play on the fields and also its recovery rate after a long rainstorm. So what have we completed? A lot of the drainage work has gone in, new sports lightings, new backstops, fencing, all new baseball diamonds, new player benches and seatings, along with drinking fountains. And then what is the main work that's going to be happening over the next few months? It's installing the seed, finishing the top of the topsoil, and then really we're just watching grass grow. It's really just about establishing the seed. The longer we give it to establish, the better a result we'll have. So once the seed goes down, we're looking early fall of 2025 to open the space back up to the public and start permitting games. So here are just a few progress shots you can see. These were all taken in August from our landscape architect, Warner Larson, and you can just kind of see the progress as we're working on the softball field and moving our way to the baseball field and kind of moving ourselves out of the site. Other than the Dilbour Auxiliary Fields project, our team is working on a bunch of different things. One of the main things is our pollinator action plan, which will be released next week. A lot of information you can find on our Summer Voice page for it, which you can just scan the QR code below. It's also in your presentations, but you can also just Google the Somerville Pollinator Action Plan, and it should bring you to our website. A few of our major points that we wanted to bring up about fall maintenance. It's really about leaving the leaves, leaving habitat for these pollinators. It's about maybe not cutting your perennials during the winter and saving it till the following spring so that we create habitat for these pollinators. Those are kind of some of the big goals that we can do right now to kind of help foster healthy pollinators. And then you can check out our finalized pollinator action plan next week to read about all the things that we can do in the spring and summer and find out planting recommendations for your properties. And then the other item I wanted to bring up is our accomplishments with our tree plantings. Last year, we planted nearly 750 new trees around the city. That was in combination of our street tree initiative, where we try and plant about 350 new trees each year. Our developer civic spaces that we condition them to plant new and additional trees to help achieve our Summer Vision 2040 goal of increasing our canopy. And then the final way we achieved that was with our new Miyawaki forest, which you can all go and see. It's right behind the high school. And also, we are looking for some assistance with maintenance. The maintenance for this Miyawaki forest should take about 2 to 3 years of weeding, and then after that, it should be establishing itself. So you can find more about that by scanning the QR code at the bottom or just Googling the Somerville Miyawaki Forest.
Hi, I'm Sean Becker, 12-year soccer coach and terrible softball player. You mentioned watching grass grow, and I wanted to know, I'd really love to see this project, but I want to know what lessons you learned from Lincoln Field, where I watched the grass grow and the field be unplayable for years, and especially towards not an early fall, but a specific date of construction availability for the youth and adult sports leagues that might want to use these fields and are planning 6 months ahead.
Of course. So lessons learned. First, we learned a lot from the Argenziano School. That project was a mixture of high sand content that really makes all the nutrients kind of pour through the field, and we have to kind of over-fertilize it a lot. The idea here is that we're creating little slits of sand rather than having a homogeneous mixture of sand. So we'll have very fertile soil and then small slits that kind of take that runoff while trying to create a cohesive field that's more fertile than a high sand content. I can give you a better date on when it's going to open once seed goes down, because pretty much from the time seed goes down, we have a year of establishment. We're hoping to start seeding next week or the following week. So we'll probably look now for the fields would open. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much to all of our presenters. We are going to transition into the question and answer portion of the evening. I would ask that any city staff available please make their way to the front of the room, this side of the room, to be able to answer any questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hubert Pinetta. I live in Clare Hill Projects. The reason I'm here tonight, I first want to thank Mayor Valentine and the city folks for being here, providing the update. Yesterday, I went to Somerville High School. I recently just graduated from Somerville High School, class of 2024. Yesterday, I spoke with 35 students at Somerville High School, and I want to ask a simple question tonight, not to bash the city or anything, but I want to ask the question, which is, what can community do to help you? Help you address these issues that we're facing in Davis Square, the Central Library, which we didn't talk about today, and other issues that are impacting, my friends, myself, people in this room. That's the question I have tonight, which is, we need a collaboration that is evident. And the question is, with all the city staff here, what can the community do? Thank you.
Wilbert, thank you for the question. I would say that we have a lot of boards and commissions if you want to be a part of that. So when we ask for input to be on, a civic advisory committee, so is that, I would say that Victoria, if you could make sure that you have Wilbert's connection, all his contact information, and if you're willing to volunteer, we're happy to plug you in to the issues that are most important for you. So is it the youth, which I think that is more your piece? Is it some of the, because you mentioned all the other staff too, is it specific other departments?
Well, it's a mix of departments. For example, like the Central Library, that's a mix of departments working. Hello, everyone. Again. Well, again, like I said, it's a mix of departments. There's multiple issues that we're facing. ARPA funding, Central Library, Davis Square, violence at the high school, fentanyl on the streets, a ton of issues that we're facing that we're not talking about. So the question is, we can narrow it down to any question, any specific issue, but the question is, for, let's say, Davis Square, what can the community do to help you? When I say help you, does that mean it's us chipping in, to get sharps containers? Is that us, calling you guys more? What is that? Like, that's the question. Like, we can go issue by issue if there's time tonight, but...
No.
was talking to some gentleman before, so I know that he's only 18. So from the police perspective, what you can do is when you turn 21, take the police exam. You're well-spoken, you're a citizen of Somerville, you're a very smart man, very intelligent. You're the candidate we're looking for. I know you're looking for now, but from a police perspective, is you are the candidate we're looking for. So consider service to the community, consider career in law enforcement or the fire department. But, yes.
Hi, I want to go back to what the gentleman spoke about street safety. You mentioned the fact that we can make a choice and make streets safe, and I think we can also try to make that a goal in Dade Square and make Dade Square safe again. We lived here for 20 years, and I don't think we've ever felt this way in that area. Just yesterday again. I was harassed again. It's been happening more and more lately, at least 3 or 4 times in the last 3 or 4 weeks. I'm sort of a big guy. I don't know what keeps happening to me, but I just feel like about it on a daily basis. I see drug use. I see guys just exchanging drugs or just going on a water party and doing something they shouldn't be doing. Like I always hear something going on in the water party. I know there's police presence, but for some reason there's always something going on there. And also would like to ask, because I have 2 neighbors who have been not broken into, but one has basically had stuff stolen from their front porch, and one has basically had an attempt where the house was almost broken into. Is that considered a crime?
Yeah, of course it is. And then again, I hope the person reported it, because we base our distribution and our manpower on where the crimes occur. So if we see a rash of crime in that neighborhood, granted we're in Seven Hills Park, but there's also a neighborhood around Seven Hills Park. If we see a rash of crime outside of Seven Hills Park, we're going to have other resources there as well.
That's like next door to me and like 2 houses away. So that's happening right there. I mean, so those numbers seem kind of low.
Well, those numbers are for Ward 7.
Not Ward 7.
Okay. That's Statue Park or Seven Hills Park?
Kingston Street.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I guess the last question is, can we just talk about what path are we on as far as like what's our goal here? Like what are we doing to make Dade Square safer?
Thank you for the question. We've been working on 2 approaches. One is the longer approach, which is the unhoused who are living there, to try to develop those relationships, to try to connect them to services, to try to connect them to housing. And then the other piece, those are longer term. The other piece has been police presence in there in the neighborhood to try to impact what is happening. We haven't gotten rid of everything, but we are stopped everything that's happening, but we've made significant progress to, change the number of people who are there and the interactions. I think the chief told me when he drove by this afternoon at 4 o'clock, didn't see anybody in Seven Hills Park, and
They moved to the JP Lakes.
yeah, no, I get that they move around.
As far as Statue Park, we're well aware of that. It is a public park. They can stay there, they can sit there. Behavior is one thing. Behavior is one thing. Fighting.
That's the thing, behavior.
Yeah, there is a law of decorum we require of everyone. We all have to use these open spaces and public spaces equally and share them equally. I just want to share the questions as well as with other people as well.
Hi, my question is, what is the city doing to protect the health and safety of Somerville kids? Because right now, Davis Square kids feel frightened. To borrow Mr. Rawson's words, they feel menaced, they feel threatened. They're afraid when they're in their homes because they're awakened at night by sounds of distress and heated arguments. They are afraid because they have heard confirmed attempted break-ins in the neighborhood. They are afraid to go out. They take long detours around parks and playgrounds on their way to school despite traffic calming measures. And they see constant, day in and day out, public usage of controlled substances in our parks. And the 3 arrests in several weeks for a kid to experience that, the constant sirens in the neighborhood, the constant police presence. So again, what is the city doing to protect the health and safety of our youngest residents?
Thank you for that question, and as a mom myself, like I value our kids and our families feeling safe in the communities that they are in and they live and work and play. So I share the same sentiment for that. And then just going back from like a public health standpoint, you know, we are trying daily, engaging with our unhoused community and trying to establish some respectable like rules and stuff of the shared space of the parks. It is something that is commonly done, that has been recommended by our Somerville Homeless Coalition as well, and kind of enforcing those rules as well with the individuals that are congregating in those spaces. But I mean, it's similar to what I've shared before on that kind of constant engagement, and then with our police patrols as well. But yeah, it's a very complex.
That's it?
So in terms of resources, or what we've tried to do is, so when I started in 2022, as people were saying, there are people hanging out in our squares, and we have started to see a rise in the homelessness. We used ARPA funds and gave that to the Somerville Homeless Coalition to open a daytime engagement center. So it's someplace where people can go, so they're not hanging outside, but it gives them the opportunity to use computers, meet with staff to connect them to resources. That location, I believe, has been open for a little over a year, so going on to a year and a half. We have a overnight shelter that is run by the Somerville Homeless Coalition that they are looking to expand to more beds. We have helped seed that money. It would be further up on College Ave. That is the ability to have something to stay at night. We have so there are daytime resources. We added staff through community health workers that are in constant contact with them. So the longer, more impactful stuff takes the longest. It's putting those resources in place, and the idea is that hopefully we will be able to have places for them to go. On the police side, we are doing the directed patrols. They are walking through the neighborhoods. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I understand how frightful and scary that this can be, and I understand in terms of the youth. But we're trying to do long-term, we're trying to do short-term, we're trying to make sure that there's housing for people to go to. So there's an option to, have a safe park and that people aren't attacked or verbally assaulted and are shooting up drugs in front of you.
I'm one of the neighbors Dan talked about whose house was, there was an attempted robbery. Clearly you have a room full of people that are extremely dissatisfied with what the city's been doing. And in the short term, people's kids don't feel safe. Your policies aren't working. What do you plan on doing differently?
Could I ask? So could I ask, Wilbert asked the question, how can you, can
We
he
elected
have?
you, it's not my job. We also elected the city council.
Blame them.
I'm not an elected official here.
Correct, and I am learning on this, Pete. I do rely on experts in the field who give us long-term strategies in order that they will be impactful.
We need a
But
short-term solution here. This is like.
If it was your backyard, you would feel the same way.
You just want them to round everyone up and get them out of the park? Or do you
Okay.
As long as there's open drug use, it's gonna be a crisis.
Drug use, guys.
If it's the drug use.
Homeless has been here for a long time.
We're neighbors.
Talk about homeless.
We're neighbors.
Talk about drug use.
If I could just speak to that, we spoke about that at the Public Health and Public Safety Committee meeting. Chief Femino spoke on it. A number of years ago, and I'm not as well versed as he was on it, is the Somerville Police pivoted their enforcement methods, recognizing the public health crisis away from deprioritizing drug use. And that was at the encouragement of our council at the time. Certain councils put forward the motion to decriminalize, deprioritize drug use. So we have pivoted away from that as a police department, recognizing that drug use is a public health crisis. We do not tolerate distribution. Like I said, we have detectives down there, and in a matter of 30 days, we made 3 narcotics arrests. I can tell you this, without giving anything away, there's probably 1 or 2 more in the pipeline over the next 7 to 10 days. Those investigations don't happen overnight. They don't happen right away. And we are limited as to our resources. We have 3 officers in the narcotics unit, and it's very difficult to do narcotics investigation with 3 officers.
Hi, good evening. My name is Al Swiston, longtime resident, first-time attendee to one of these. Until there's an election, I would like to know, I'd like to tie together a couple of questions and statements that have been made. Until there's another election, what I would like to do is start reporting all of the incidents that I have encountered, 3 in the last week. 1 on the way here, got a little meta. But on the way here, I was accosted in Tufts Park, which I have found all patrols in Davis have sort of pushed everything out a little bit further. Now in Tufts Park, 3 times last week, 2 with my son, luckily tonight I'm not. But I was accosted. I was not allowed to leave the park. I had to yell at this person. It's the first time in 12 years I have thought I may need to use my weapon carry permit. It's the first time I've ever thought that I would have to use it. I want to know, if you can't measure it, you can't solve it.
Correct.
How do I report it? That's all I want to do between now and an election.
If it's an emergency, it's 911. If it's a non-emergency, 617-625-1212 is the business line. Those would be emergencies in my.
Am I the judge of what is an emergency?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great.
Absolutely.
911 it is. Thank you.
You're threatened, absolutely.
So, I want to move away from the specifics of the unhoused population, which has, we can go back to it. But one of the problems that I've been having as I negotiate Somerville with my 8-year-old is the lack of public space and the sense that public space is being taken away. The issue with the Winter Hill School meant that the youth center closed. the youth center closed, and now the library is closed after school. So as a central meeting place, we're all the way here in the west part of the city, and he has friends from across the city. The Central Library, especially with the Green Line, is a wonderful meeting place, but it's now closed unless you're a high school student. There's no central meeting place so long as the weather stays good. We can't go to Davis, which is another decent meeting place because of all the transit options. But the square is there. We've seen people uncomfortable. I've explained to him that sometimes adults can't control their feelings and we just need to give them space, just like we do toddlers. And he's actually okay with it and not afraid, but he's 8. I'm almost with him. I wouldn't be letting him wander around. The pool is now closed, so we can't do play dates at the pool. I'm curious about the prioritization of spaces for youth outside of the schools. Not all kids are served by the schools, and kids, because of our neighborhood school situation, kids can't always get together with their friends at the school because as a diverse city, kids have friends in different schools and looking for safe places. The unhoused situation means they're also looking for space. They're also in the library, they're also, in the scarce public space that's available. And I'm wondering if, as we look at facilities and as we look at resources, we look at more general use public space, and warming shelters for the unhoused, looking at trying to find little community spaces that can be open for kids to meet. Arlington has a Boys and Girls Club. You don't have to be in Arlington to go. We're trying to reach out further, but the transportation issues, especially to meet with people from across the city, are pretty difficult. And I'm wondering on a status on the library and a status on the pool.
Great, thank you for the question. I wrote a few notes down, so I'm going to start with Winter Hill School. As I mentioned in the meeting, there was a problem. It's old infrastructure, it's construction methods that are failing, the brutalist concrete structure, failing worldwide. We relocated the entire school over to the Edgerly. So backing up, spaces that are non-school or after-school programming is when it. No, I meant after, so Parks and Rec, is that what I understood. So in the after-school time slot or on the weekends or in the evening is, I worked with high school students who were juniors and seniors in 2022, and I asked them, what are their needs? What did they want? They responded back by saying, we want 15-minute teen spaces. We do not want the big open. So what did these high school students do? They worked with the design school at Harvard. They collected data. They surveyed the students. They said for high school students, they wanted places to hang out. So what I did is I opened two spaces. Two spaces. One in the east, in the Edgerly, one at Powder House. The libraries wanted to use the teen room as the space. We also have two other spaces that our community partners use. It's a city-owned building at 165 Broadway that Teen Empowerment runs programming out of there. And also one of our partners over near Aeronaut and Conway School is the is Summer Nova that also shares their space with us. When the Winter Hill School happened, we modified the hours at the Edgerly. So the Edgerly is still being used, but it's being used later. In terms of the library, we had made it had unsafe situation that was reoccurring for patrons, for staff, and local youth. So we needed to first break that cycle and redirect it. So we temporarily modified the hours. We use the time in this last time to accelerate and get things in place that were interventions and that would be working. And so part of those interventions is, you know, adding the social worker, improving on-site security, increasing programming in these spaces both inside and out, and also working with the professionals on the school side to be able to engage the youth and provide wraparound services. So right now, our target is, our target is to go back to normal hours next week. We have installed security cameras, both outside and in, and we have identified a high-quality security service trained in de-escalation and with significant experience in public spaces and working with youth. And we're working at the moment to onboard them, and as soon as we know that, they're signing the contract, we will be able to get that. We're also doing expanded programmings at the library, both inside and out, we haven't quite, and we're looking to expand in the after-school time slot, also another location which will be published shortly once we tie everything up. In terms of the pool, as our old infrastructure, as things are not working, there was a mechanical, I don't know if there's anybody here that can speak more specifically on it, but it was a something mechanical. It was supposed to go close, as I understood, for routine maintenance for a certain period of time, but they had a mechanical issue. And this is that answer everything, or was there one other point that I missed?
I think those are the points, but I think this fight over the park space is because there are whole constituencies, some of which are in conflict, like unhoused adults and middle grade kids aren't really a great combination. I would say middle grade adults and middle grade kids don't really want to spend a lot of time in the same space. And so figuring out how to better care for them in the space, not even organized programs, kids wanting to get together to play a game, having a table, having a space to do that is something that's very hard in a city where everybody's crammed, we're out of space. And the kids on Public Space for Kids, especially kids who've watched public space vanish with COVID, only to come back and then to vanish again, is a really, really hard hit. And figuring out ways to get that space back and to publicize that space and to keep that space safe, whether that's moving adults, giving adults different space and giving that space back, or opening up more safe space and holding that space of value, I think is important, because lots of these infrastructure failures have hit underage community hard.
Yes, thank you. We have added some open space to accommodate for that. There's the Revis Field, there are some other parks, but what I was hoping is, John, maybe you could get her, I'm sorry, I didn't hear your name.
Oh, sorry, Elizabeth.
Elizabeth's contact information, and that maybe we, to give more information on spaces. I'm thinking at least for the open space piece, and then Victoria, we can follow up on the indoor spaces.
Thank you so much, Mayor. We are approaching 9 p.m., so we will take one more question, and any questions that we don't get to tonight, you can email to cm@somervillepma.gov.
She's very smart.
You have a question yet? Here.
You guys don't ever give up when I have my hand.
Hi, my name's Tucker. I'm new here. I'm one of the only ones who's new here. There's a lot of people here who are very angry, and I think we all see what the problem is and what needs to be done about it. So my question to you is, how are you working to make it not functionally illegal to build shelter beds in the city of Somerville.
I'm sorry, how am I, can you repeat that again?
It's functionally illegal to build shelter beds in the city of Somerville. First Church is trying and fighting legal battles over it. I would think that would be the first thing that we want to do about an unhoused population in the city. So I'm asking, what are we doing to change the zoning laws so that shelter beds, housing, mental health care beds, it's hard to get into a psych bed in this country, and it is Harvard University. So.
Thank you for the question. Who is Beth? Is Dan? Thank you. So we are not opposed. I am supportive of the shelter beds, but can you?
Dan Bartman, the Planning, Preservation, and Zoning Division. I don't agree that it's functionally illegal to build shelter beds in Somerville. There's two possible ways that beds get created. Homeless Shelter is an organization that their sole purpose is to provide overnight accommodations to the unhoused. There's also the ability of other organizations to provide sleeping accommodations while their real purpose is broader. And that's just one of the things they do. Same way that a church might run a soup kitchen to provide food, they could also provide beds. That became confusing when we adopted the MBTA Communities amendments because the definition of homeless shelter was standalone use in one of the chapters of the zoning ordinance. And when that amendment went through, it needed to be moved into the definitions of Article 2. And instead it was deleted. And so then it became a question of interpretation about what a homeless shelter is versus any other entity providing beds. Because that definition lived in our code, there wasn't room for interpretation. It was the enforcement authorities read that sentence, and that sentence says what it is, because it's the law. So for a moment in time, after we passed the MBTA Communities Act, there was a question in people's minds about that same setup, and so we have just recently submitted an amendment to put that back, which is exactly how it was before we adopted those MBTA Communities Act amendments. So we consider that a correction of an inadvertent deletion out of the code that led to some confusion at the time. But that's kind of the two setups, is you can either be an organization that solely provides that, or it's one of your, one of the things you do, but your core function is something else and bigger picture. Does that make sense? So, but neither of them are illegal. That one case had a question about it, but they're permitted in our city in both circumstances.
Can you just wait here for a second? So to ask, like, what's actually been done? When I started in 2022, we opened a temporary overnight warming center, which has never ever happened in the city, that the city ran. It was for a very short period of time. We actually did it in the West Branch Library because we have old infrastructure that hasn't been working. Last year, and that was for a limited amount of days, and it was during the coldest months as we saw the increase in the unhoused in our community. I forget, but it was days, it wasn't months. Then last year, the second year, we opened up a temporary overnight warming shelter in addition to what our nonprofit homeless provider does for, I think it was around 24 beds that, or 20 beds. So overnight, we did that from January 8th until March 30th. This year, we started looking around at our different buildings. We moved that out of the Armory, which is where we did it last year. The multi-use of all the classes and the concerts and all that, co-locating that wasn't quite working. So 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, we received authorization so to speak, technically, from the Somerville School Committee to locate an overnight warming shelter for, we're hoping to start on December 1st, but we have contractor issues, so it might start later in the month to run until about mid-April. Is that right? About mid-April. At the old Cummings School, which is on Prescott Street, it's near City Hall. There will be a very specific community meeting for that. That's going to happen in in October. So that is what the city is doing. We are trying to use what assets we have because we are in, a housing crisis, an unhoused crisis, not only, in Somerville and Massachusetts, but also nationwide. Those are specifics. I guess there are some zoning tools, and it is whatever our other nonprofit provider, the Somerville Homeless Coalition, is looking to expand beds. Thank you.
And with that, we have reached the conclusion of our Ward 7 City Hall Community Meeting. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you for your time. Please submit any unasked questions or comments to cm@somervillema.gov. Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for hanging out.